Welcome to The Hidden Load, the podcast where we uncover the unseen weight carried by the educators and leaders in medicine and explore how to lighten it. I am Dr. Santina or Tina Wheat. I am a family physician, an educator, a leader, and a coach. Each week, we will dig into the challenges that often go unspoken, from burnout and boundaries to purpose and identity to figuring out sustainability, and share practical tools to help you move from chaos to calm and from burnout to balance. Because the hidden load does not have to be yours to carry alone, and in fact, shouldn't be. Let's get started.
And today is episode 2, Balances and Stillness. It is constant adjustment. If you missed episode 1, we talked all about the hidden load, what it is, what it costs you, and some strategies about how you can start shifting your mindset about it. We talked about why it shows up so often in healthcare and why it's really unique to healthcare and a little bit different than in other professions. And today we are going to build on that foundation with a topic that comes up all of the time. And that is balance. When most of us hear the word balance, it's this amazing thing that we are supposed to strive for. You think of the perfect life of having it all. We think of something calm and steady, like that perfect set of scales. But I'm not sure that that is real in a work-life balance. I'm not sure that that definition of this magical life is what we should really be striving for. And to be honest, I used to think of it that way too. And I thought that I would know I had finally achieved the perfect job if I could find that work-life balance. But I realized over time that the balance really doesn't mean stillness. It actually looks like constant moving, constant readjustment, and figuring out what is right for you at this point in time. And so in this episode, I'm going to share some different ideas on how we can actually achieve balance in our healthcare careers. So let's start with 2 different images of how I actually think we should be thinking about balance. One of those is the ballerina on pointe, and the other one is a person standing on a balance board. And in today's episode, we are going to unpack both of them and how those images can teach us how we can move forward with practical strategies and build a kind of really dynamic balance in our lives. Let's start by talking about this perfect myth of balance. So many of us, especially in healthcare, think balance is something that we can finally achieve if we just organize ourselves enough. I've already mentioned that I used to think that myself. We think if I can master time blocking, if I can catch up on all of my notes, finally clear out that inbox, if I can just say no and set my boundaries in all of the right moments, then I will reach that magical state that is called balance. And once I'm there, it'll stick. I'll have figured out the secret sauce. But that's not really how it works. I can remember times when I thought that I had finally figured it all out. I had mastered my schedule and thought that it looked neat. I felt that my family rhythm was fairly smooth. And I was even keeping up with exercise and rest and eating well. And then, bam, something else happened that threw me off center. Maybe it was a child got sick. Maybe it was that the hospital made a policy change and I had to figure out how that changed everything for my learners and for my team. Maybe it was just my energy just tanked out of nowhere and I didn't know what it was. Suddenly, that idea of balance evaporated. And it was really after it had never been there for all that long. And for a long time, I thought that that meant that I was just failing, that I wasn't doing a good enough job, that maybe I was just not disciplined enough to do what other people could do. But the truth is, nothing was wrong with me. What was wrong was my idea of what I needed to shoot for, my idea of what I needed for balance. Balance is just not a one-time achievement. It is not a fixed state. Balance is a practice. You have to keep using strategies to keep you there. So let's talk about that ballerina on pointe. And this example is super meaningful for me right now because my oldest daughter has just been promoted to point. And so she will be learning all of the different techniques and positions that she has to figure out to keep herself up there. We even spent an hour going through her first fitting for point shoes. I didn't know that it was such an intense thing. But I'm excited for her on this journey and what she's accomplished. So let's think about that perfect ballerina on the stage. When you're sitting in the audience and you watch these beautiful dancers, it looks effortless. It looks like they are holding so much grace. And when they hit those positions, that they are perfectly still. But if you look closely, you see that those dancers are never actually perfectly still. Every muscle in their bodies are stretching and working in different ways. Their toes, their calves, their core, even their arms and their breath. You would think the things that are so far away have nothing to do with it, but they are all working together. The dancer is making constant, tiny adjustments to help keep themselves upright. And here is the secret. They wobble. They don't wobble in a way that make them look clumsy, but in the natural, constant way that allow their bodies to respond to gravity, that allow them to constantly adjust and hold themselves up. That wobble is not a failure. It is a proof of the amazing amount of strength that each one of those athletes has. And you know what? That's us too. In our daily lives, you are going to wobble. That is part of doing what we do. We shift between our work demands, our home responsibilities, our health, our relationships, our sense of self. And all of those things change depending on where in your life you are. And so often we think, oh, I can't stay balanced. I just must be doing something wrong. But really, it's that wobbling that is balance. I want you to think back to a recent moment where maybe you wobbled. Maybe it was you skipped a meeting to pick up a child. Maybe you rescheduled a commitment because you needed rest. Maybe you just decided that Fridays weren't the day that your brain could do a certain type of task and you had to readjust that work to a different part of your schedule. Maybe you asked for help instead of thinking that you had to push through alone. Did you fall? You might have, but then you picked yourself up. And other times, you didn't necessarily fall. You adjusted. That is what we're talking about when we really talk about balance, the balance that is sustainable. So maybe you don't like the idea of a ballerina, but let's switch to the idea of a balance board. Have you ever stood on one of these at the gym or maybe when you were younger at a playground? Do you know what happens when you stand on these if you hold perfectly still with your knees locked? Well, you fall immediately. It just doesn't work that way. The only way that you get to stay steady is if you keep all of your muscles engaged. You keep your core engaged, you keep your knees soft, you have your body loose but responsive. That is what real life balance also feels like, especially in careers like ours of healthcare, where unpredictability is absolutely the norm. You have to stay loose and flexible. Our patients don't arrive in neat blocks. They don't always show up in exactly what their chief complaint was. They don't show up always as looking like that test question. Our systems change at a moment's notice, often without warning. And the life that we have at home is often throwing curveballs that never seem to come at times that are convenient for what's happening at work. Not that they should, but you constantly have to adjust. And so if we cling to rigidity and we think that in order to have balance, that everything must stay in its place, if we hold on to, I have to constantly be in control, then unfortunately, we will get knocked off. Sometimes you have to let it go. Because if we bend, if we adjust, if we let ourselves move with the shifts that are happening in life and at work, then we are able to stay right. And so I want you to ask yourself, where in your life right now are you locking your knees? Where are you trying too hard to hold on to control? Where are you trying to force stillness when what you actually need is flexibility? When I was a resident, I became pregnant with my first daughter, Catherine. And I remember my advisor saying something along the lines of, I can't wait to see what it's like when you lose your rigidity. I had no idea what he was talking about. But now, one of the pieces of advice that I give my residents when they're about to become parents is you have to learn to go with the flow. There's nothing like having a child that forces you to embrace flexibility. It's not a skill that I used to have, but it's something that I have had to lean into. And the truth is, it's not just about being a parent. It's about the flexibility that you need to find balance at home and at work. So how do we practice this type of balance? Well, here's 4 things that you can try this week. The first is check your posture. Just like that ballerina I told you about checks their alignment, you can pause to notice your own. How am I standing right now? Or if you're driving, how am I sitting right now? How am I physically and mentally? Am I tense? Am I holding onto that wheel super tight? Or am I holding my entire body super tight? Am I holding my breath? A small moment to notice how you're feeling can allow a reset to happen. And that reset can bring you back into alignment. Once you do that, then you can make micro adjustments. Balance is built on small, minute shifts. I'm not telling you to completely change your entire world. I am telling you to take small adjustments to help you stay upright. 5 minutes of rest, saying no to one more thing, eating lunch without charting or multitasking. My favorite, starting to put do not disturb on your phone so that you can wind down for bed. These little moves, these little tiny adjustments, they can help keep you steady. Then let's move on to strengthen your core. Dancers and other athletes all balance from their core. For us, your core does not necessarily mean your abdominal muscles. Instead, it means your purpose, your values, your priorities, and your non-negotiables. When you know what matters most to you, everything else can flex around it. This is why I often start about talking with knowing your purpose. Someone is feeling out of alignment or feeling like they're on their way to burnout. When you can reset there, then all of the decisions that you make that are in line with your purpose can surprise you, but help you stay balanced. And then reframe the wobble or sometimes the stumble. Instead of saying, oh, I'm off balance, I'm off my game, I want you to try saying, I'm actively balancing. I'm adjusting to give myself the best balance. The wobble isn't a weakness. It is proof that you are alive and adjusting. And it's okay to share that with others so that they know it's okay for them to adjust too. So today, we redefined this idea of balance as a constant adjustment. It's important to remember that balance is not a perfect frozen picture, but it's a living, breathing practice. You have to make constant adjustments to keep it. Balance is strength in motion. It looks like the ballerina who is poised but constantly adjusting. It looks like the balance board being loose and flexible and responding to shifts. Your challenge this week is simple. Notice when you are holding too tight and notice when you wobble. When things feel shaky, instead of judging yourself, I want you to remind yourself, this is balance. This is what it looks like. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Hidden Load. If this episode spoke to you, I hope you will share it with a friend who might need that reminder that balance isn't just about stillness, it is about strength and adjustment. And I hope that you will go and rate this podcast wherever you are listening to it and follow it so that you don't miss a next episode. And speaking of our next episode, here's a little preview of what's coming next in episode 3. We are going to talk all about boundaries, why they're so difficult for healthcare educators and leaders, and how you can start setting them in ways that protect your energy without adding to your guilt. I think you'll find it both practical and freeing. And until then, remember, balance isn't stillness. It is constant adjustment.
Thanks for joining me on The Hidden Load. Tag me on Instagram at Dr. Tina Wheat or email me at santina@santinawheat.com with your takeaways and ideas. Don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, let's lighten your hidden load.